Welcome back. Today we'll begin our study of how the kings of Egypt wrote their names. But first, we should check our homework. Our first sentence was, "Evil is on every road." This was a lamentation, a kind of literary genre popular after the decline of centralized government in Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period. Everyone was complaining about everything. We can use our adjective Jew, which means evil, as a predicate adjective and put it up front as the verb. That's evil is. The word for upon is our face ideogram, which was pronounced her. Now we need road, what, because every is an adjective and comes after the noun. All we have to do now is add the every, which has to agree with the noun. What ends in a T, which means it's feminine. So we add a T to neb, which is every, and we have it. And that's it. Evil is on every road. It would have been vocalized as Jew, her, what, nebet. Good. Our last English to hieroglyph sentence was, "We will stand up and speak to our good Lord." Start with the verb for stand up, eheh. It's we stand up. So we add our suffix pronoun en for we and speak to our good Lord. There was no real and in ancient Egyptian, so we just go directly to our next verb, speak, which is dejed. Next, I would repeat the we suffix pronoun. It would read as, we will stand up and we will speak. The future is understood here. We don't have to do anything special. Next, we need the to, which is the N water sign because it's to a person. Next, we need to start with Lord, which is the neb basket, either with the man determinative or without. Let's do it without, so we see things both ways. It's our good Lord, so we need the suffix pronoun for our again. That's our Lord. Now we just need the good, which is nefer. And that's, we will stand up and speak to our good Lord. Good. We next had two sentences to translate from hieroglyphs to English. Let's do the first one. Well, our verb is not to know, chem. Next, we have a suffix pronoun viper, so it's he doesn't know. What doesn't he know? Well, our next word is secher, plan. And it has two adjectives after it, this and iker, excellent. So he doesn't know this excellent plan. We have a predicate adjective beginning our next sentence. It's the word for great, ah. So something is great. What is it? Your house. It's your masculine singular. Okay, so your house is great. Next comes another predicate adjective, the word for plenty. It's followed by the dependent pronoun it. So it is plentiful, referring to the house. Next is our owl. It probably means in. So the house will be plentiful in what? Well, the next word, thing, chet, is followed by the neb sign with a T because chet is feminine, so it's everything. And that's followed by nefert, the feminine form for good or beautiful. So we can pick. Let's go with beautiful. The sentence is then, your house is great, it is plentiful in everything beautiful. Good. That's our homework. Now, let's look at the Pharaoh's names. At the very beginning of kingship, pharaohs had only one name, the Horus name. The Horus name was placed in a serech, a rectangle representing the palace facade. We saw a very early one on the Narmer palette. So one of the names of the king associates him with Horus and shows that the king lives in a palace. Narmer only had one name, but later, during the Old Kingdom, when the pyramids were built, pharaohs started to add names. By the 5th dynasty, they had 5 names. Let's look at the names of the builder of the first pyramid ever, King Zoser of the 3rd dynasty. The first monumental building in stone is the Step Pyramid of Saqqara, built by King Zoser or Djeser, either way. His name is probably written something like this. But the truth is, we don't have any monument from his time with this name on it. The name Zoser comes from later sources. You'll see it spelled in 2 ways, Zoser, Djoser. The DJ spelling is closer. It approximates the serpent hieroglyph, but both ways are correct. If we look at the monuments of Zoser, inside his pyramid, on his statues, we'll find his name written like this. Necher Chet, perhaps meaning something like divine body. This looks nothing like Zoser, so he probably had 2 names, Zoser and Necher Chet, but neither was written in a cartouche. Cartouches are a later development. But we can see the beginnings of the development of the king's names during Zoser's reign. The architect of the Step Pyramid, Imhotep, honored his king by commissioning a statue of Zoser. The statue is lost, but we have its base, and on it we can see the beginnings of the full 5 titles of the king. Let's look at the hieroglyphs for Zoser's titles and names. The actual inscription reads from right to left, but I've flipped it from left to right just for consistency. The first 4 hieroglyphs, the sedge plant, the bee, and the 2 loaves underneath it, comprise the first title. The sedge plant is the emblem of Upper Egypt, and the bee of Lower Egypt. So it proclaims Zoser king of Upper and Lower Egypt. The whole ensemble was pronounced something like Nesut Biti. Next, we have the vulture and the cobra on Neb signs. They were protective deities of the king and comprise another title. We call this the 2 ladies' name, and it was pronounced Nebti, the dual form of Nebet, lady. The vulture was the goddess Nechbet, and she had a protective function, almost mothering. The cobra was Ujat, and she too was a powerful protectress. Now we come to Zoser's name, Necher Chet, but the inscription doesn't end there. There's one more additional sign. This is the word for gold, pronounced Nub. It's a collar or pectoral with the ties hanging down. So the king is golden. This golden name will later be associated with Horus and become the Golden Horus name. I think the idea here was to say that the pharaoh, the Horus, was going to live forever. Because it didn't tarnish. Gold was the metal of immortality. The mummies of pharaohs had their toes and fingers placed in gold finger and toe covers so they would last forever. The burial chamber was called the gold room, not just because of the treasures it contained, but also because it was intended for eternity. What's important to note is that while Zoser has only 1 name on his statue base, he also has 3 titles. Later, by the 4th dynasty, the kings will have 5 names and titles. Zoser's 3 titles, the Horus name, the 2 ladies' name, the Golden Horus name, are not written in cartouches. Later, the last 2 of the king's 5 names will be written in cartouches. But in the time of Zoser, cartouches hadn't been invented yet. The word cartouche, remember, is French and means cartridge, like a cartridge shell. Napoleon's soldiers saw upright cartouches carved on temple walls and thought they looked like cartouches, bullet casings. So, only 2 of the king's names were written in cartouches. The 3 that we've already seen are not. The most important 2 I've left for last, and they are the ones written in cartouches. The prenomen, the first in a cartouche. It's preceded by the sedge plant and the bee. We saw this with Zosser. Now, for the last name, what we call the nomen, this is the 5th name. The one we haven't seen yet. It's preceded by the hieroglyphs Sa-Re, son of Re. The name that follows this epithet is probably the name of the king that he had before he became king. It's what his mama called him. So these are the 5 names of the pharaoh. But it took a while for the kings to develop the complete titulary. The development from Narmer's 1 name in a serech to Zosser's 3 titles to 5 full names would take centuries. But let me show you an intermediate step. What might be the first officially carved cartouche in history. It was done for a very great pharaoh, my favorite, Sneferu. Sneferu is the pharaoh who really showed Egypt how to build pyramids. He comes soon after Zosser, during the 4th dynasty. At Meidum, he built a pyramid with the first interior burial chamber. Zosser was buried beneath his pyramid. And he also attempted to make it a true pyramid with straight rather than step sides. But the pyramid had structural problems and was abandoned before it was used. How do I know it was abandoned before it was used? Because behind the pyramid are 2 giant stelae that should have inscriptions proclaiming that this is Sneferu's pyramid. But they're blank, never inscribed. So Sneferu built this innovative pyramid that he couldn't use. But he didn't give up. That's what I like about him. He built another pyramid about 15 miles away at Dashur. More than 4,000 years later, in the 1880s, excavators found a stela there, and this time with the names of Sneferu carved on it. The stela now stands in the courtyard in front of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Most people walk by it, but it's a wonderful piece of history, if you can read hieroglyphs. At first sight, it's a jumble of hieroglyphs, but if we look closely at it, I think we can see the king's titles. Let's look first at the big picture. Look at the top of the large rectangle carved on the stela. What's on top? Yes, Horus. And on the bottom? It's the serech, the palace facade. So this is an indication of a Horus name. But what is Sneferu's Horus name? Let's look at the hieroglyphs inside the rectangle, just below Horus. What's the first hieroglyph? Yes, Neb or Lord. Now, what's the word beneath it? Well, the sickle is Ma'ah. We have the phonetic complement, statue base M, and we have a T. So it's Ma'at, truth. One of Sneferu's names is Lord of Truth. Ma'at also meant divine order. So Sneferu could be Lord of Divine Order just as easily. Good. Next we get a title we've seen before, the sedge and the bee, Nesut Biti, king of Upper and Lower Egypt. So that's one of Sneferu's titles. But we don't get a name, just a title. Beneath it is another title, the 2 ladies' name, Nebti, the cobra and the vulture. Now comes the ambiguous part. Beneath the 2 ladies' name is Lord of Divine Order again. Sometimes 2 of the king's 5 names were the same, and that seems to be happening here. But which name is the second Lord of Divine Order? Is it the 2 ladies' name? But look beneath the mot, and you will see a Horus on the gold hieroglyph, the golden Horus name sign. Perhaps the second Lord of Divine Order is the golden Horus name. We just don't know for sure. Sneferu's stela has the first official carved cartouche. As you can see, it reads from right to left, like the rest of the stela. Sound it out, and you get Sneferu. The folded cloth S comes first, then a Nefer sign with the viper F and the mouth R, phonetic complements, and last, the quail chick, Sneferu. It's nice to be able to see the development of the king's titles on the Sneferu stela. We have 4 of the 5 titles. The Horus name, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt name, the 2 ladies' name, and the golden Horus name. All that's lacking is the son of Re name, and we'll get to that today. But there's one neat aspect of the stela I should point out. Look at Sneferu sitting on his throne. There's a mini story here. Look at what he's wearing. First, there's the double crown, and the tall crown of Upper Egypt, and the red crown of Lower Egypt. He is clearly king of Upper and Lower Egypt. But he's also wearing a special ceremonial cloak that was worn only for the Heb-Sed festival, the ritual of celebrating the king's 30th year of rule. Sneferu is well established. Most portraits of kings are stylized, but I'm convinced this is a true portrait. Look at that receding chin. He looks like a nerd. This must be a portrait. Let's look at the cartouches for some of his successors, other pyramid builders of the Old Kingdom. Sneferu's son, Khufu, succeeded him and famously built the Great Pyramid of Giza. He's the one who's usually credited as the great builder, but I think Sneferu really deserves the credit. Think about it. He built the first pyramid with an interior burial chamber. He built the first true non-step pyramid. He built the 3 largest buildings on the planet at the time. He was amazing. A while back, I did a 48-lecture Great Courses series on the history of ancient Egypt. I devoted an entire lecture to ranting and raving about why Sneferu was the greatest, so don't get me started. For now, let's look at his son Khufu's cartouche. It's pretty much what you'd expect, a clear transliteration of how we pronounce his name today. Khu-u-fu. What's important to note is that these 2 pyramid builders, Sneferu and Khufu, are the first to put their names in cartouches. But these 2 names do not yet contain the names of gods. That will change with Khufu's successor, his son Jedefra. Jedefra chose to leave the Giza Plateau and build his pyramid about 5 miles away at Abu Roash. Let's look at his name. We have the Djed pillar. We've seen this before. And what's important is that right up front, we have the name of a god, Re. The name may have been something like, he is stable like Re. We will see Re in the name of his successor also, Ka-F-Re. The Greeks pronounced his name Kephren, but we can see from the hieroglyphs that Ka-F-Re is closer to the original. It may mean something like, he appears like Re. The solar disk Re comes first because of its honorific import. The god's name is written first, regardless of how the name was said. This addition of Re to the name may be significant. It probably indicates an increased importance of the god Re and the cult of the sun. When Jedefre died, he was succeeded by his nephew, Menkaure, who decided to return to Giza and build his pyramid alongside his father's and grandfather's. Again, a Re name. This is clearly a religious trend, indicating the increasing importance of the sun god. The pharaohs of the 4th dynasty were the last to build huge pyramids. The kings of the 5th and 6th dynasties built smaller pyramids, but they continued to include the sun god in their names. This is going to be the end of pyramid building in the Old Kingdom. let's look at a few names for practice. The last king of the 5th dynasty is one of the few who did not include Re in his name. Who is he? Yes, it's Unas. Unas started a tradition that was continued into the 6th dynasty. He covered the walls of his pyramid with magical spells to help him resurrect in the next world. Today, we call these the pyramid texts. They're beautifully carved hieroglyphs and are the first large body of writing in the world. We'll be translating them a bit later. For practice, let's look at a couple of 6th dynasty kings. Who's this? The plow hieroglyph that comes right after the sun is the MR biliteral and means beloved. Don't forget, honorific placement. Yes, it's Mary Re, beloved of Re. This king has 2 names in cartouches, and the other looks like this. Pronounced? Yes, Pepi. He was Pepi the First. There's another king with the name Pepi, Pepi II, and the Pepi name is spelled exactly the same. The way we tell them apart is by the second cartouche. Pepi II's name looks like this. Remember the honorific placement for the god? How is it pronounced, and what does it mean? Nefer Ka Re is how it sounded. It means the beautiful Ka of Re. The Ka was the soul of a person, a kind of spiritual double that you needed for the next world. So Nefer Ka Re is praising the soul of Re. Pepi II was the longest reigning monarch in the history of the world. He ascended the throne when he was a child and ruled for about 94 years, a reign that concludes the Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom lasted for 5 centuries, from about 2686 BC to 2181 BC. The dates aren't important. It was an era during which pyramid building was perfected, but also when the titles of kings were being formulated. Old Kingdom pharaohs tended to have Re in their names, suggesting he was the chief god during the formative period for Egypt. When the Middle Kingdom began, times were different, and different gods were important. So we get names like this. First, we have the god's name, written by the first 3 hieroglyphs. Today, we usually write it as Amun, but it's also written Amen and Amon. It's all one name. It's one of the great Egyptological scandals that there's no agreed upon standard way to spell the names of the kings or gods. Anyway, this is one name where we don't have to worry about honorific placement. The first part of the king's name was pronounced Amun. Next, we have the owl, which means in. Last, we have Het, which means front. It's the front of a lion. Amenemhet. Amun is in the forefront. Another Middle Kingdom pharaoh incorporated a different name in his titles. You can see the crocodile god, Sobek, in the front. The 3 hieroglyphs that follow are Hotep, to be pleased. Sobek, Hotep. Sobek is pleased. Sobek is a bit of a strange god. He's a crocodile, but we don't know much about his attributes. There's a beautiful temple on the Nile, Komombo, that was dedicated to him. But there are no interesting mythological stories about him. I think that because the crocodile was the fiercest creature in the Nile, that Egyptians just felt they had to worship him. Many pharaohs combined a god's name with Hotep in their names. One of the most popular names was Amenhotep. Amun is pleased. I've seen lots of names from the Old Kingdom and Middle Kingdoms and shown them to you. Now it's time for the big show. Let's jump to the New Kingdom and look at the full 5 titles of one of the great pharaohs of all time, the great warrior king Thutmose III. Let's take it slowly. First we have a Horus, followed by a bull, and then an arm holding a stick, which means strong. This is followed by a city name we've seen before. Cha'em Wasit, shining in Thebes. So the name is something like Horus, strong bull, rising in Thebes. That's obviously his Horus name. Next, we see the two ladies, which begin the next name. After the vulture and cobra is a hieroglyph that's a twisted fiber. We haven't seen that before. It's an SK biliteral. It's part of the word that means endure. And here it's abbreviated, just as the twisted fiber hieroglyph. So it means endure. Now, when the word endure was written out, it looked like this. And for some unknown reason, it was pronounced something like just wa. Next come two hieroglyphs. Nesut, which means king, but there are also two reed leaves, which makes it the adjectival form, kingly. This is followed by the solar disk Re, and the Mi biliteral hieroglyph, that means like or as, it's like Re. But with the Re coming first for honorific import, the god's name comes first. At the end, we have in the sky, enduring of kingship like Re in heaven. Next, the golden Horus name. Note that it's preceded by a scepter, another word for power. The two lions are pronounced pehwi. It's the dual. It means strength. The hand holding the wand was pronounced jesser and means holy. The hieroglyph after it, we've seen before. It's the hill with the sun rising behind and was pronounced cha and means rising or shining. There are three plural strokes after it, so it's a noun. Perhaps risings or appearances? It's not clear. The great translator, Sir Alan Gardner, suggested something like powerful, holy of diadems, something like that. It's a difficult one. Now come the two main names, those in the cartouches. One is preceded by the sedge and the bee, the pre-nomen, king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Men Cheper Re. Now let's look at those three hieroglyphs in the cartouche. The easiest one is Re. Here, our solar disk ideogram stands for the sun god. It comes first in the cartouche, even though it wasn't pronounced first because of honorific position. He's the god, he comes first. The middle hieroglyph is the game board hieroglyph, a biliteral pronounced men. It means monument or shape or form. So we have the men and the Re of Men Keper Re. The last hieroglyph, the scarab, is the Cheper. It means exist, to exist. So Tutmosis III's name means something like the form of Re exists. Tutmosis III's last name is the second one that's in a cartouche, the one preceded by Sa-Re, son of Re. Inside the cartouche, we have the ibis, which in ancient Egypt was pronounced Jehuti, but the Greeks called him Toph, and it's stuck in classical antiquity. So that's what we use today. After the ibis, we have the biliteral MS, which means born or birth. So we have Toph is born. But remember, his mother called him Jehutimos. Notice, of the 5 names of Tutmosis III, only one contains the Toph by which we know him. The way we can tell Tutmosis III from Tutmosis II or 1 or 4 is by the 4 other names which are different from other kings named Tutmosis. We've done quite a bit with the names of the pharaohs, but I don't want you to go away without some homework. Here are 3 new vocabulary words for today. They'll be needed for homework sentences. Here's one. The second hieroglyph, which is new to us, is a pestle used for grinding. It's a biliteral in the if family, like D, to give, and me, like or as. Well, the pestle is for the sound T. Add it to your biliteral chart with the other biliterals, right next to the I biliterals. So the word was pronounced iti. The determinative shows a person of authority, complete with a staff, a mace, and a crown of some sort. The word means monarch or sovereign. You'll see it in the homework assignment. One more vocabulary word. It was pronounced we, the quail chick. Gives us the W, and the two strokes are the Y. Now, so you can remember it, I call it the wowie bird. That's because it's an exclamation for how. Like, how beautiful is your house? Or how bad this is. So just remember the wowie bird when you see it. Next, how would you pronounce this? Yes, ich. It means then, and it's quite a useful word showing causation. If one thing happens, then something else. Now, to reinforce everything we've learned, let me give you a couple of hieroglyphs to English sentences for homework. This one first. And then try this one. Okay, these sentences are enough to review what we've learned so far. Next time, we will see the ancient Egyptian way of writing numbers. I'll see you then.